Easter, or the week of Easter. Starts off with the Passover. The Passover is a 7 or 8 day Jewish festival celebrating the Israelites' exodus from slavery in ancient Egypt, marked by a special meal called a Seder and a ban on leavened foods. In 2025, it was from April 12th to April 20th. The next day on the calendar is Palm Sunday, and this comes from Matthew, where Jesus rode into Jerusalem riding a donkey, and when he rode in, they were shouting, "Hosanna to the Son of David! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord! Hosanna in the highest!" And 500 years before that, it was prophesied in Zechariah 9:9, "Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion! Shout in triumph, O daughter of Jerusalem! Behold, your king is coming to you. He is just and endowed with salvation, humble and mounted on a donkey." So the next one is Good Friday. That is the day So the story of Passover happens in the book of Exodus. And the book of Exodus was written about 1400 BC. And in this story, we see the Israelites are slaves to Egypt, and God is trying to bring them out of Egypt. And so on the what he does is he has them get a lamb for each household, an unblemished lamb. The congregation of Israel is to kill it at twilight, take some of the blood and put it on 2 doorposts and on the lintel of the houses in which they eat it. For I will go through the land of Egypt on that night, and I will strike down all the firstborn in the land of Egypt. And the blood shall be a sign for you on the houses where you live. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you, and no plague will befall you. So when it happened, we have that here. There was a great cry in Egypt. And the Pharaoh said, "Rise up and get out from among my people." So the people of Israel took their dough before it was leavened, and they got out of Egypt. So that is the story of Passover in a nutshell. Now in the Passover, there's something called the Seder meal. Now the word Seder means order in Hebrew, and it's referring to the structured 15-step ceremony that includes retelling the story of Exodus. Now in it, there's this plate of different items that represent different things. For example, the shank bone represents the lamb's sacrifice. The bitter herbs represents the bitterness of slavery. And the mixed apple and nuts represents the mortar the Israelite slaves used to build Egypt. Now, it's important to know that the Jews have celebrated Passover for 3,500 years. And in the time from the writing of Exodus to Jesus, about 1,400 years, they celebrated the Passover. And when there was a temple, they also did a Passover sacrifice at the end. So the last day was the Passover sacrifice. But when there wasn't a temple, they would do pretty much everything else except the sacrifice. This is what they're doing today. They're pretty much doing everything else except the sacrifice, because there has not been a temple for the last 2,000 years. But it's just important to know that for the last 3,500 years, they've been celebrating Passover in remembrance of something. So that kind of suggests that something happened 3,500 years ago to remember. The 4 cups of the Passover. The first cup of sanctification, performed at the start of the Seder. This cup is for sanctifying the holiday. It corresponds to God's promise, "I will bring you out." The second cup of deliverance, drunk after the main part of the story of the Exodus is told, is associated with the promise, "I will free you," or "I will save you." Some traditions involve placing a drop of wine from this cup on the table for each of the 10 plagues. Third cup of redemption, consumed after the meal. It represents God's promise, "I will redeem you." Fourth cup of praise, drunk at the end of the Seder, often alongside hymns of praise. So these are the 4 cups of the Passover Seder. matzah. Matzah is a flat, unleavened bread traditionally made up of wheat, water, and salt that is central to the Jewish holiday of Passover. Now, leaven causes rise. So what they do is they poke holes in it to check for rise or check for leaven. After that, they put on an oven, and that's what causes all the brown striping. Now, a matzah tosh is a 3-compartment bag used during the Passover Seder to hold 3 pieces of matzah or unleavened bread. Now, the matzah tosh, rabbis all agree that it represents unity. They just don't know, they disagree on what unity. For example, some will say Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, while others will say priests, Levites, and Israelites. Either way, the leader will take the middle piece out. He will break it in half, wrap it in white linen, hide it somewhere in the house for the kids to find. Whichever kid finds it will bring it back to the leader, be rewarded, and then the leader will break it into multiple pieces and distribute it out to everyone at the table. At this point, they will drink the 3rd glass of wine, or the cup of redemption. And after this, the leader will then take the empty linen cloth and throw it on the table as a sign that it is finished. Now, the last step is the Passover sacrifice, if there is a temple. So this is the step that today they don't do because there's no temple. But in Jesus' time, this would have been the next step. Now, 1400 years after the Exodus and 1400 years of the Jews celebrating Passover, we can see that Jesus' Last Supper was the feast of Passover in John. And Jesus was the leader of the Passover feast. And when he had taken some of the bread and given thanks, he broke it and gave it to them, saying, "This is my body which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." And in the same way, he took the cup after they had eaten, saying, "This cup which is poured out for you is the new covenant in my blood." So we know that he broke the unleavened bread and handed it out. Now, leaven is often symbolic of sin. You can see this in 1 Corinthians 5. So isn't it interesting that Jesus, who never sinned, likened himself to unleavened bread? But let's take this a step farther. In this, Jesus removes the middle piece of bread from the matzah tosh. Remember, the matzah tosh represents a unity of 3 and 1. So let's think about this. Jesus, who is in the middle of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, removes the middle piece of bread. Now, the bread that is bruised and striped, just like he was about to be from whips and beating. It's pierced just like he was about to be pierced to a cross. He breaks it in half, distributes out, and he likens it to himself. Then he takes, after they had eaten, he then takes the cup of wine, or in this case, Dr. Pepper, and we know that this is the cup of redemption because it is after they had completed eating. And it represents God's promise that I will redeem you. So he takes it and he says, this cup which is poured out for you is the new covenant in my blood. And we see in Jeremiah, roughly 600 years earlier, we see that he prophesied there would be a new covenant.